Check out this unbelievable clip over here that will get your blood boiling. We'll watch it together, then talk about it. Let's go.
Our fight is not with guns. Our fight is to wake up people and to make them think. We believe strongly that the state of Israel will come to an end. We have God on our side.
So let's go to an area where we can all know something. You don't need to know any Torah. Let's go to Israel's Six-Day War in 1967. So Israel won the war. There are people, Rabbonim, Balabatim, that Ad Hayom Hazeh insists that Israel's victory was a gross nes. That al pi derech hateva they had no chance. Now, first of all, every military expert and intelligence agency in the world predicted that Israel would win the war because they had the stronger side. If the Arabs would have won, maybe it would have been a mess. But even if Israel was weaker, it wouldn't be a mess. Because weaker sides sometimes win, like the Pri Megadim by Hanukkah. But they were the stronger side. The Rebbe said, I heard this from both Katz too. He heard this from the Rebbe. Because President Johnson, when Avi Iban, the Israeli ambassador, came to President Johnson and said they're going to wipe us and throw us into the sea. So he said to him, look, all our intelligence agencies say that you're going to whip them. And I'm saying that to Lashon Nakiya. And the CIA, before the war, said there may be a war, and even if Egypt attacks first, it'll take a few days, maybe a week, maybe a little more, and Israel will wipe them all out. All of the Arab armies, all of them. Because the Arab armies stand no chance. Everybody knew. And the Rebbe writes in Al-Gul Tzmur, he says, everybody knew, the Mechtevei Yitim, everybody knew Israel was going to win. I heard from both Katz, he said, if the war was a mess, Johnson was a Navi. If every scientist says, look, the nest, this is what's going to happen, and it happens, that's not a nest. On Purim, everybody thought it wouldn't happen, the Yeshua. Only Mordechai knew, but everybody thought it would happen. And everybody knows this. And even people who you tell them this Grois Tzaddik made a moifis, they'll say, hey, you believe these crazy stories, but the Six-Day War is a mess. There was one person, there was a Satmar Rebbe, that said, B'shas Maisa. No, you're crazy. It's not a nes. It's derech hateva. The only Maisa sudden here is that people think it's a nes. The Tziyonim made up a bilbul that the Rebbe said it was a nes from the Sitra Achra. He never said that. He said it wasn't a nes. 6 places approximately. He says it wasn't a nes. The Sudden does make nisim in many places, but this was not one of them. This was a derech hateva. Now, you go to people would say it, and they'll still say it was an S. And how do you know it was an S? Well, this Rav said it was an S. Rabbi said, the only way to know if it was an S or not is to assess the capabilities of both armies and decide that the military capabilities of the Arabs was much more than Israel, and that Israel did something that they couldn't do. Which Rav is going to say that he's capable of doing that? If you ask these Rabbonim, if a dishwasher is a klishlishi or klisheni, they'll say, oh, I got to know how it works, every little prat, detail. But over here, no, it was an S. Everybody knew it was an S. What do you mean everybody knew? This one man got up and said, what are you, crazy? It wasn't an S. Every scientist, every expert, every historian, everybody knows it wasn't. They knew Israel was going to win. Here is an example of the Bilbul HaMoichus that takes place. And I want to tell you something, in my book that I wrote, so I wrote all sorts of bad things about Zionism, Zionim, Medina. You know what bothers them the most? It's unbelievable. The fact that I wrote the Six-Day War wasn't an S. And I quoted the generals said it wasn't an S. A son of one of the generals in the Six-Day War read my book, and he contacted me. And I asked him if he heard anything from his father more. By the way, I quoted his father. His father was interviewed for a magazine after the war, and he said, this thing, we were never even in Sakana, it was a bluff. It was bluff. We wanted people to get scared, and people were scared. So they told everybody it's a sakana, and we wanted America to give us green lights to attack. But I said, did you hear anything else from your father that we don't know? He said, yeah. He says, Egypt. He says, everybody in the know knew that Egypt would not be ready to fight anybody in a war for 18 months, maybe 2 years. Now, here's the question. Ask people. Ask them, why do you say this war was a mess? Why? Why? Well, everybody said it was. No, that's not a reason, right? They will not have a reason. It's against everything, the derech hateva that everybody knows, and yet they insist with a tkifus mamish of Mesiras Nefesh, no, it was a nest. If anybody can explain to me this, except that's a Maisa Sutton. And here you have something that you don't need to be a big London to know. And one man, Satmar Rebbe, got up and said it's not a nest. Because, simple, he didn't say because of, well, he did have riots from Sukkim about the Arabs being bad fighters. But he says the ikar is, all the Mechtaveitim, everybody knew Israel would win. It's very simple. Here you have an example. So somebody's going to ask me, all these Rabbanim were chaylik on the Satmar Rebbe. So I said, they were chaylik on him about that also. And that's easy. You don't got to be a Lamdan for that. And what happened? So clearly, it's no kasha. See that? Look at that. That's something that everybody here can understand. You go look at a newspaper, look it up. It's a davar pashut. And people with its kifas, no, it was a nest, it was a nest, it was a nest. Why would somebody think it's a nest? Why? Because everybody said so. The Hamoidia said nobody will ever figure out an explanation for this war. They wrote that in a newspaper. Menachem Kasha, in that ziyah for the two, he says, oh, this was a big nest like Yitzias Mitzrayim. They came Dom Vaish v'Simras Oshon, and Hashem made Nes Gadol Hayopoy, and the whole thing is Baba Maises, Mamish Baba Maises. Now these are the people who tell me Cholik on the Satmar Rebbe in the Torah. These people that say 6-day war was a nest. Have any pshat?
So there's a lot to unpack here. Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro is saying that the 6-day war was not a miracle because had it been a miracle, it would be the work of the devil, of the Satan, to try to convince the Jewish people to sin.
Now, let me point out this idea that Jewish statehood is something to celebrate also emerges not only from Ramban, but even from Rambam.
So how did Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro come to this conclusion? And where do we stand, the Jewish people who are not following Satmar? What are their opinions? What are their answers to his questions? So in this video, we're going to go through some of his questions that he brings up, and we're going to address each one head on, and we're going to try to understand why this, what we're witnessing right now in Eretz Yisrael, is not only miracles, it is the footsteps of Mashiach, and it has been predicted in Yeshayahu, in Yirmiyahu, in Yecheskel, all talk about a time that half the Jews have returned and the nations come to war against Israel. So let's dive in. Check out this next clip.
We talk about the Rebbe's Shita, about Zionism. First we have to understand what Zionism is, and most people don't understand. And I want to tell you that when the Rebbe wrote Vayel Moshe, a lot of people make a toys. They think that Vayel Moshe is the Rebbe's explanation of what's wrong with Zionism. It's mamish not it. That's not why he wrote Vayel Moshe. Vayel Moshe was about making a Medina. A Medina and Zionism are two different things. In fact, there's 3 different things. Thing number 1, there's Zionism. Zionism is a hashkafa. The Chassidim call, what we call hashkafa, the Chassidim say shita. It's a hashkafa, it's a shita, it's an ideology. You don't even need people should have it. The person can make an ideology on paper or whatever he wants. You don't even need a Medina for Zionism. There was Zionim and Zionism before Medina. In fact, one of the greats at Zionim wrote in an article in a Zionistische magazine, I think it was 1904. I don't remember, but I saw it. Better Zionism without Zion than to have Zion without Zionism. That means better we should be Zionim on a Medina than to have a Medina and not be Tzionim. That's what he said. There's a difference. There's Tzionim, Zionism, and a Medina. 3 things, and each one is a separate sugya. And I'm going to write this down over here. 3 separate things. There's Zionism, Zionists, and Medina. How we deal with Zionism is one parsha. How we deal with Zionists is another parsha. And how we deal with the Medina is another parsha.
So what's stunning about this list of things and about the entire 2-hour video is that the entire video is focused on what Zionist is, and we'll get to that in a second, who the Zionist is and what the statehood is, but it refuses and ignores and mocks who Eretz Yisrael is. You see, forget Zionism, forget Zionists, forget the Medina. Eretz Yisrael itself is being thrown away with Zionism. And that's something we're going to address, and that's the core of the issue. Let's continue.
So first, what's Zionism? Now, in the Rebbe's Svarim, he speaks ruba de ruba about either Zionists, Kaifrim, the Tzionim, or the Medina. But there is a place, now there's 2. Until a few years ago, there was only 1, where he touches up, Klor, what's Zionism? What's the ideology of Zionism? And I have over here from the Chedushay Torah Mesibus in Parshas Pinchas. Now, there's no tape on this drasha because this was said on Shabbos. I think it was 1955 in Bnei Brak. In Bnei Brak.
You see, one thing that Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro is doing here is trying to show how Zionism is treif. It's not kosher. Their goals weren't aligned with Torah. The reason he's doing this is if it's not aligned with Torah, then it can't be the beginning of the Geula. Because if, in fact, it is the beginning of the Geula, it would have to be aligned with Torah. And how would it be possible that the Geula could come through something impure, something less than perfect? We're going to deal with that quite a bit a little further on. But think about it. Were there other cases in Tanakh throughout the Torah where amazing, amazing things, for instance, Shlomo HaMelech came from David's relationship with Bathsheba, and he built the Beis HaMikdash. In the time of Ezra, the 42,360 Jews, 113 of them were named as being intermarried. They built the second Beis HaMikdash. So is what he's saying true? That if Zionism is puzzle and treif, that would therefore indicate that we can't be in messianic times? We're going to get into this quite a bit soon. Hold on. Check out this next clip.
Parshas Pinchas, Kedushay Torah Mesibus. And he's talking about Ivrit. Now, Ivrit, a terrible aveir, he says. Ivrit has nothing to do with the Shalosh Ruos. If you speak Ivrit, you're over on the Shalosh Ruos. You become a shutif like the Bechiras and the aveir, the Shalosh. No shaykhs with the Shalosh Ruos. So the Torah shekas of min, yes. Because the words, yes. But that doesn't explain the choimer ha'isr. Here he explains it. Now listen carefully. Chutz mikol hanal, Sefer Torah shekas of min, the words, borur ki tachlis kol hasofa hazois, etzel kol hameflogois, v'ha'organizatsias shalahem, min ha'kotza el ha'kotza, min ha'smoil v'yad ha'yamin, asher bezeh kulon shovin yachad l'ro, hu rak dover echad v'hu tzionism. Uperish shel tzionism, harehu nationalism. Dahainu, she'al yidei hasofa v'hatzionism nasim la'am. Zois hoimeres, she'al yidei zeh yihiyu nichshavim le'yehudim. וזהו הפך דס תורתנו הקדושה דעל פי התורה אינו נכלל בכלל ישראל, אלא מי שמתנהג בדרכי התורה מקיים מצוותיה. And now listen to this, because this is the Iker quote. De'ein umasenu uma ela b'toirasa kenoida. Kenoida? I'll tell you why it's kenoida. Whoever wrote this over didn't put the mucker in. But these last words, Ein umasenu uma ela b'toirasa, is a quote from Rav Sadia Goin in Emunos V'deos. Whoever wrote this didn't write that it's a kenoida. It's a Yaduatika quote from Rav Sadia Goin, and this was the Iker Taina against Zionism. Zionism was an ideology that said that Klal Yisrael is an Am Kachol Hagoyim. That means that what makes the French people French? France, French food, the French language, and whatever else they do in France. What makes the Italians Italians? The language, the land, the culture. What makes the Yidden the Yidden? The Torah HaKadoshah, nothing else. There is nothing else that makes Klal Yisrael, no common land, no common language, no common culture there in Lashon HaKodesh, was not something that made us into an Am. What made us into an Am? Hayoim hazeh nihiyesa la'am. Kabbalas HaTorah. Before Kabbalas HaTorah, there were no Klal Yisrael, even if the Avos were Yidden. It's the machlokes, right? But there was no Klal Yisrael. They were individual Yidden. But Klal Yisrael, Am Yisrael, there was no such thing. There was Am Yotzei Mitzrayim, but even Yitzias Mitzrayim was only the beginning of Kabbalas HaTorah, like the pasuk says, Talten Elokim al Ohr Hazeh. Yitzias Mitzrayim was the beginning of Kabbalas HaTorah, and Nasa v'Nishma was the end of Kabbalas HaTorah. But Kabbalas HaTorah made us, it means if there wouldn't have been a Kabbalas HaTorah, it's not the pshat we'd be Yidden without a Torah. We wouldn't be Yidden. And if another Am would have been Makabal the Torah, they would be the Yidden. Whoever is Makabal the Torah is the Yidden. We get transformed. A Yiddish neshama, a Yiddish midas, Yiddish koiches, only comes because of the Torah, nothing else. You didn't have a holy land, Eretz Yisrael. But that doesn't make us an Am. It's not a national homeland.
I really don't understand. I'm without words. Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, please understand this. Rabbi Yaakov Emden, in his introduction to the Siddur HaYavitz, Sulam Beis El, says the following. Why is it that Torah in Chutz La'aretz is forgotten and Torah in Eretz Yisrael continues? And he writes that the Torah itself tells us to live in Eretz Yisrael. So saying that Zionism doesn't align with Torah and that the Torah doesn't need a national homeland in order to be fulfilled is completely not true. In fact, the Torah tells us to move to Eretz Yisrael. And that's why Rabbi Yaakov writes that the Torah in Chutz La'aretz can't be passed on, because the children will look at it and say, but the Torah says to move to Eretz Yisrael. The Torah can only be fulfilled in Eretz Yisrael. So the argument that we don't need Eretz Yisrael to fulfill the Torah is completely wrong. Let's continue.
Well, how do you say homeland in Lashon HaKodesh? What is a homeland? People told me Eretz Yisrael is a homeland. They don't even know what they're saying. And I asked them, if it's a homeland, there should be a Lashon HaKodesh word. What is the word for homeland? Moledes. Like Avram Avinu. Lech lecha mi'artzecha u'miladetcha mibeis avicha. Moledes means the place the Am was born. And in the Israeli Declaration of Independence, it says, in this land, the Jewish nation was born. That's apikorsis. We were not born because we went into the land. We were born on Har Sinai, where in the Midbar, where there was no land and there was nothing, because only Hayom Hazeh Niyesa La'am. Lashon HaKodesh is a tool for us to get closer to Hashem. It's not like English that makes us into Americans, Anglos, whatever you want to call it. The kesher that one American has with another is because they speak the same language, because they have the same country, because they have the same culture. The kesher that one Yid has to another is only because they both were Makabel Torah. That's it. Nothing else. Ein umaseinu uma ela b'Torasa. The land, Eretz Yisrael, was given as a tool to be Makayim the Torah, closer to Hashem. The language, Lashon HaKodesh, was a tool to become closer to Hashem. But only Hashem is the only thing that makes us Yidden. The Torah, Hashem, I'm using them interchangeably. Without the Torah, there are no Yidden. If you don't believe in Kabbalas HaTorah, you don't believe Sedah Zazach Klal Yisrael.
See, this is circular reasoning. Because if the Torah, in fact, tells us to live in Eretz Yisrael, and why we became a nation, why bring this whole revelation that's happening now to the Jewish people? Why make it into whether or not we are a nation because we have the Torah or because we have the land? Now, that is a good argument that could have been made 100 years ago. But in fact, had the people who are now arguing against the Medina come to Eretz Yisrael and make a change in the government and in the land, we would have a religious government right now, and all these arguments would still not fall away because he would argue that they started for the wrong reasons. And that's really the flaw in his argument. And soon we're going to watch a clip by Rabbi Breitowitz, which shows, in fact, that his assumption is flawed.
Just like when the Torah came down, so there was Malachim, that all sorts of midrashim, what happened. One of the things that happened, that all these refugees from Egypt, we were Egyptian refugees, were now like that, transformed into Yidden, Klal Yisrael. It was created. You want to know what's the taich of a Yid? A Yid, Judaism, it's not a nationality. It's not, we have nothing in common as far as nationality is concerned. We speak the same language. Me and the Yemenite Yid that lives around the corner from me, we don't speak this now, we all speak English, but he speaks Yemenite, different culture. His mother is, where Mami looks like a Yemenite from the Alta Haim from Yemen. We only have one thing in common. We're both Makabel Torah. We're Chayiv in mitzvahs, that's it. And if you don't believe that there was such a thing as Kabbalas HaTorah, you don't believe that there's such a thing as Klal Yisrael. There's no such thing that I'm a Friar Yid. That means I don't believe in Kabbalas HaTorah, but I love the Jews. What Jews? What's a Jew? You don't even believe there's such a thing as Klal Yisrael. So you have a different type of what's a Jew. Maybe you think a Jew is some kind of tribe, or maybe you think Jews are some kind of nationality. You're an Oived Avodah Zarah. This Zionism, this nationalism, this is the real echte Zionistische Avodah Zarah, even without a Medina, because Yisrael v'Araisa v'Kudsha Brichu Chadu. And if you say that Hashem is, the original Oived Avodah Zarah said Hashem is different. They made a new Hashem, a physical Hashem. The Christians made a new Araisa, they made a new Torah. And the Tziyonim made a new Klal Yisrael. It's the same Avodah Zarah. If you say that we're a nationality, the Jews are a nationality, anybody that believes he's a Jew that doesn't believe in Kabbalas HaTorah, that's Zionism. That's the ideology.
I don't know what to say. I really want to cry. I mean, this is just the beginning. We're just getting started. But to ignore Eretz Yisrael, to ignore the land, and to say that Yisrael v'Araisa v'Kudsha Brichu Chadu, and to ignore Eretz Yisrael, and to just throw Eretz Yisrael out because of Zionism is exactly what Zionists wants to do. And why continually try to prove that the Zionism are not Torah values? We understand that. I don't think anybody in the Torah world from today's Haredi world would disagree with that. We all agree with that. That's not the point. The question is can the Geula happen from people who are less than religious? And in fact, is it Yishuv Eretz Yisrael to build up Eretz Yisrael when it is not following the Torah and is the antithesis of the Torah? And for here, I'll bring you the most empirical raya, proof. Omri, the king Omri, the Gemara in Sanhedrin asks, why was Omri merited to have 3 generations? Because he built up the Shomron. Now the Shomron, in case you don't know, and this is why this is so important, this is why everybody misses this point, and everybody if you don't learn Tanakh, you don't understand the importance. See, in Yecheskel, when it talks about Gog and Magog, 38 and 39, Lamed Ches and Lamed Tes, it talks about the two halves of Klal Yisrael. One is called Yehuda, Binyamin, and one is called Yosef. And these two will come together. Yosef was the 10 tribes who were exiled. These 10 tribes were the ones who were the secular Jews, the ones who built the Shomron. And Omri, the Gemara says, because he built the Shomron, was given 3 generations of Malchus. But the Shomron was built as a Beit Avodah Zarah. It was a place where they put the Egel inside. They put the calf, the Avodah Zarah, in the Shomron. But yet, the Talmud says that he did mitzvahs Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. So intentions over here, his whole point, that intentions mess things up, and that we need to have the most purest intention, that's the Yehuda feeling. That's the feeling that we need to have, everything being perfect, that the Geula has to come in a perfect sense, and that if there's any impurities, any wrong thoughts, it ruins the whole thing. And that, my friends, is where we're going to have to differ. Let's take a look at this clip over here of Rabbi Breitowitz explaining one of the shittos of the Ramban about the redemption, and then we'll go back to Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. Have a look.
Let's talk a little bit about the ideology. I've mentioned before, and you probably have learned, that there's a big machlokes, the Rambam and the Ramban. Is there a mitzvah d'oraisa of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael? Is there a mitzvah min HaTorah to live in Eretz Yisrael? Now, let's start with the Ramban first, because the Ramban is more beferish. The Ramban says, min HaTorah, there's an actual mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. You may have a heter not to. The Ramban is also moder. There may be heterim not to. But we start off with the idea that there's a mitzvah, there's a chiyuv to live here. Where does the Torah say that? So the Ramban points out that this is in Parshas Masai, in the end of Sefer Bamidbar. V'rishtem osa v'shaftem ba, you shall inherit the land. Now, everybody knows that. I'm sure you've heard over the years. The Ramban's opinion is Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah d'oraisa. But what's a little less known is that the Ramban subdivides Yishuv Eretz Yisrael into 4 components. It's not just living here. There are 4 chalokim in what is called Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. Chalak number 1, this is quite amazing. There's a mitzvah on the Jewish people to establish sovereignty over all land that is within the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael as described in the Torah. Okay, do you hear this again? There is a mitzvah, according to the Ramban, Yishuv Eretz Yisrael doesn't only mean living here. Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah to establish sovereignty. Establish sovereignty means establish a state. I'll get to the Goren Ksubas in a moment. That's component number 1. Component number 2, the Ramban says that we are not to leave the land desolate and uninhabited, meaning even if you have sovereignty, you might just leave it, do nothing to it, but rather you have to develop it so that people can either live there, or agriculturally developed, or industrially developed, or even aesthetically developed, whether it be parkland. You don't leave it in a state of shemama, desolation and abandonment, but you cultivate it so it serves the benefit of the Jews that live here. That's component number 2. Component number 3 is a psychological idea. This is the Ramban at the end of Sefer HaMitzvahs, that no matter where a Jew lives, the Jewish people are not allowed to have a homeland other than Eretz Yisrael. That's kind of a psychological meaning. Even if you're living in Galus, you have to look at that as temporary. And the notion of a homeland has to be Eretz Yisrael.
So we're going to get back to Rabbi Breitowitz in a few minutes. But first, let's watch this next clip from Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro describing why he thinks Zionism is wrong, but he never really addresses why Eretz Yisrael is right. And we're going to try to unpack that. Take a look.
You don't need a Torah to be a Jew. You have a sprach. You have a language. And I understand what the Rebbe is talking about. It's nationalism. Later, he says, in the same shtickle over there, he says again, listen to the Loshen. Ha'ikar hu, first he says, Lihizar b'chol dvarim ha'murim l'mayla b'nyoni hatznius, v'lihi yoizoriz v'nishma shloim lihi gar achrei hatziyonim l'minehem, u'lachol meflog oisehem ha'nigrorim achreihem, v'emin hatzarich lefartum b'henu b'shem oisehem, avol mitzah hatzar ha'shova shebahem, shekulam she'ifosam hi ha-nationalism, asher hi kefira mamish. This is the kfira of Zionism. Zionism makes statement number one. The Jews are a nationality, or the Jews are an ethnicity, or the Jews are a race, or the Jews... Different Sionim had different shitas, because the truth is, as you're going to see in a moment, if you don't hold that this Kabbalah HaTorah makes the Yid and a Yid, you're not going to have anything that makes any sense. What nationality? What national characteristics do all Jews have? Jews have nothing in common. Nothing! Except for one thing. The Torah Kedoshah. That Zionim wanted to make, no. We have other things in common. We have a sprach, Ivrit. That's our national language. Now you see what they're trying to transform Klal Yisrael from a thing that was created durch the Torah to a Am Kachol HaGoyim. We have a language and we have a land. Eretz Yisrael is not only not the Holy Land. Eretz Yisrael is a homeland, the Moledet, the place where the nation was born. That's what their Declaration of Independence says. That's Avodah Zorah Pikorsis. We were born on Har Sinai. The land does not make us into an Am, and the Sprach does not make us into an Am. That Zionism means. Listen, if somebody asks you, what's Judaism? It's not even a religion. It's a religion, but it's more than that. If somebody asks you, what's a kosher piece of flesh? So you say, whatever the Torah says is kosher, that's the type kosher. It's a religious doctrine. The Torah made it kosher. It's the same thing. What's a Yid? What's Jews? The Torah gave a status to certain people. They said they're Jews. You're chayiv in mitzvahs. You're chayiv in more mitzvahs. You're chayiv in less mitzvahs. Whatever the Torah gave a status to a Yid, that makes him a Jew. Because the Torah says he's a Jew. If you don't believe in the Torah, you don't believe there's such a thing as a Jew. And if you do believe that there's such a thing as a Jew, and you don't believe in the Torah, that's Zionism. That's Zionism. If you want to know the taich, what Zionism means that it's shaykh to be Jews without Kabbalah HaTorah, without religion.
See, I have no idea of why we have to throw out Eretz Yisrael, because Zionism was trying to do something. Nobody cares. Nobody today, Zionism is, for all practical purpose, done with. Half the Jews are in Eretz Yisrael, and there's more Torah being learnt in Eretz Yisrael since the time of Chizkiyahu HaMelech. So Torah, whatever arguments that Satmar had against the Medina, against the statehood, against the nationality, right or wrong, the reality is that half the Jews have returned. So, what do you think is going to happen next? Do you think that we're just going to throw all the Jews out and then there'll be a miraculous thing? There's something fundamentally wrong with continuing this argument today. Let's continue.
How? So now there are all sorts of different shittas amongst the Tzionim. But one thing is it's not the Torah. That's Zionism. End of story. Anybody that believes that he's a Jew, Kal v'chomer, if he believes he's a good Jew and a proud Jew and he loves you, but he doesn't believe in Hashem, or he doesn't believe in Kabbalah HaTorah, he doesn't believe in the Torah, that's Zionism. That's Avodah Zarah. All the Litvaks, the Rebbe just said, that's the type Zionism, the Hainu nationalism. It says nationalism, in the Nun Aleph nationalism it says there. That's Zionism. And all the Litvaks, they had the same time. Rabbi Chonan writes on nationalism is Avodah Zarah, and that's Zionism. Rabbi Berzovsky, Lagabe the Shitas HaAguda, wrote a Sefer B'Oyas Hazman. He says, starts off, what's Zionism? Nationalism. That's Avodah Zarah, l'chol hadeyas. That's what Zionism was, and l'chol hadeyas, it's apikorsis Avodah Zarah minus. Nothing to discuss. Which means that any connection that people think that Jews have besides Hashem and the Torah, there's a Yiddish Jewish country, the Jewish land, the Jewish army, the Jewish flag, the Jewish language. It's all Avodah Zarah. There's only one thing, the Jewish Torah and mitzvahs. Nothing else is Jewish. When you say a Jewish state, what does it mean, a Jewish state? A person can be Jewish. It means, like the French, it's a French state. That saying that anything is the state of the Jewish people, that's Avodah Zarah. Jewish people have no state. We never will have a state. We have a holy land, and David HaMelech and Shaul HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, they had a melucha, but the melucha was not a national state of the Jews. This is the most important yesod in understanding Zionism. If you understand this, you understand everything about them. If you don't understand this, you understand nothing. Now,
this is so fascinating because, as many of you might know, Theodor Herzl, at some point, the founder of modern political or secular Zionism. And again, I don't want to knock Herzl. Again, I want to make, it's an important point to recognize. Herzl was a person, he was absolutely not one who rebelled against the Torah. He didn't know anything. He had no Jewish education whatsoever. I don't think he was even circumcised. He knew nothing at all. So if you talk about a proverbial tinok shenishba, he was as close to a tinok shenishba as one can imagine. So I'm not going to knock him as a Rasha because he didn't keep Shabbos or didn't believe in the mitzvahs. I think the one thing we can say positively is that despite the fact that he had no connection to Jewish teaching, he was a person who cared about the Jewish people, and this was his idea, to try to do something good for the Jewish people in the aftermath of the anti-Semitism that was poisoning Europe, especially as a result of the Dreyfus trial. That kind of influenced him a lot. Remember, Dreyfus was a French soldier who was framed fraudulently for different types of spying, and many people in the world saw this whole trial as a fake trial that highlighted the poisonous anti-Semitism that existed in Europe. And Herzl developed an idea, which we reject, but Herzl rejected an idea that the reason why people hate Jews is because they're so different than everybody else. They don't have a state, they don't have a government. If we have our own state, we have our own government, then we will be respected by the nations of the world, and then anti-Semitism will go away. So Herzl saw Jewish statehood as equaling normalization. Normalization would mean that anti-Semitism would go away. Now, Lamaisa, I think all of us know that even from a secular perspective, Herzl's idea, it was simply didn't work. If you ask yourself this question, this is a very emotionally difficult question to ask. Has the establishment of the State of Israel reduced anti-Semitism in the world or increased it? It probably increased it. And again, this is what the Navi Yechezkel said thousands of years ago, that when a Jewish person says, I want to be like all of the Goyim, and then I will be accepted, the nations will come back and remind you that no matter how much you want to be like them, they won't let you do it. In fact, in many ways, anti-Semitism is one of the tools Hashem uses to make Jewish people know that we have to be different. It's a very tragic way of having to discover that. But be it as it may, I don't want to impugn Herzl's motivations. Now, because Herzl didn't have a special attachment to Eretz Yisrael or to Torah, so Herzl was willing to accept any type of land as a place for a Jewish state. He just wanted Jews to have a country. So as a result, Herzl at some point, because it was very difficult to get, because at that time, Palestine was under the control of the Ottoman Empire out of Turkey, And the Ottoman Empire didn't want a lot of Jews. I mean, there were Jews here already, but he didn't want a large-scale number of Jews coming in. So Herzl at some point was toying with Uganda to be the Jewish home. And what's interesting is the Ramban had Ruach HaKodesh. The Ramban says, no, Jews are not allowed to make any other state their home other than Eretz Yisrael. So I mentioned three components of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. One is Jewish sovereignty over the land. Number two, that the land should be not desolate, it should be beautified and cultivated. Number three, Eretz Yisrael has to be the homeland, the Jewish national home. Number four is the final one, that I myself should live here unless I have a hedger. So the point is, that's most important is, some people will tell you, well, yeah, there's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael, but who says you should have a Jewish state? Maybe we shouldn't have a Jewish state until Mashiach comes.
What's interesting to note over here is that we're in agreement that Zionism isn't the Torah ideology. That's not the question. The question is what do we do with the reality that we have today? Let's take a look at Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. Let's see how he deals with this, and then we'll see Rabbi Breitowitz. Have a look.
I want to tell you something. Step two. Nationalism was a philosophy. It came about in the 1800s, which is why Zionism developed in the 1800s. And just like other philosophies, let's take communism, for example, there are many different madregas of nationalism. It's like communism. If you say that, I know, there should be a lot of welfare and the government should regulate businesses, so that's not mamish communism, but it's, it's in the direction, right? Then there's socialism, and then there's Soviet communism. It's not even the most Chinese communism. Same thing with nationalism. There are a lot of different shittas. Nationalism, in the most basic thing, meant that there's such a thing as a nationality. It used to be, in the olden days before nationalism, there was no such thing. If I was in England, I didn't look at myself as an Englishman. I looked at myself as a subject of the king, King Egbert, Lamoshel, right? If I was in France, the French king, and I fought a war for my king. Nationalism meant, no, I'm not just King Egbert's subject. I'm an Englishman. I'm a Frenchman. It's part of your identity. It's part of who you are. And the group is a little stronger madrega of nationalism means that if you put the group together, it's greater than the sum of its parts. That the English people, when you put them together, it creates, we're not just a bunch of people, like a corporation is a bunch of people that have a connection with each other, a business relationship. A country, a nationality is not just that. It's something new. It's as a gestalt. That's German. I don't think they have that in English. It means that if you have something that's bigger than, different than all the parts, there's such a thing. You are a part of England in the sense that the cells are only, the identity of a cell is only as a chelik of a guf. My fingers are not individual fingers, they're a chelik of my guf. And we're all a chelik of our country. You hear? Then there's even a stronger madrega, where the people, mamish, don't even have any identity, except as members of their country. These are wilde, wild, crazy philosophies. People don't believe them anymore. But Zionism took the most strongest, wildest. There are different madregas in nationalism, but they have the strongest, wildest type of nationalism. There's Aaron David Gordon, a friar, big Tzioni Apikoros. He said this, that all the Jews are cells in the body, and the body is the Jewish nation. And what happens with this is that Jews don't have interests as individuals. It's only the collective that has interests. It's like my finger doesn't have any individual interests. I do. Whatever's good for me is good for my finger. If something's bad, there's a me, right? Now who's the me? The me is the Am, the nation. Ben Gurion had this shita. He called it mamlachtius. It means that the interests of Israel, whatever is good for Israel, is good for the Jews by definition, because Israel is the Jews. The Jews' interests are not interests of us, not even interests of the Freya. Whatever is good for Israel is the interests of the Jews. That's why he said when they took the money, the reparations from the Nazis, and they asked him, how you talking, you take these reparations, mamish, it's blood money. Well, sikhu koifel nefesh roitzeach, right? Asher rosh olamos. What you're taking, mamish, it's kufr kapor over here. So he said, no, if the Holocaust victims would be around today, they would say, whatever's good for Israel, that's what we want. Whatever's good for Israel is by, not the pshat, vice dois, it's good for the Jews. Because that's the taich, it's good for the Jews, because Israel is the Jews.
So here's a problem. Yeah, we agree with the philosophy. I don't understand why it's so important to show the problems with Zionism. Every Haredi person in Israel knows the problems with Zionism. It's the conclusion that you make. And therefore what? Therefore, if Zionism isn't Torah-aligned values, and therefore what? What are you going to do? Check out this next clip.
This is what they want. Let me tell you what else comes out because of this. If you like Israel, you can hate the Jews, but you're a good person. You're not an anti-Semite. If you like Israel, why? Because Israel is the Jews. And if you don't like Israel, then you're an anti-Semite, even if you have nothing against Jews. Why? Because the spirit of the Jews is Israel. Mamela, whatever, if you don't like Israel, you are behechrach an anti-Semite. Not it's a simon you're an anti-Semite. It means you're an anti-Semite because the spirit of the Jews is Israel. Israel is, and fakert also. If you like Israel, you can hate Jews. It doesn't matter, you're okay. You're a good guy. We see this Bisman Hazeh. This is the ideology. This is Zionism. This is what the Rebbe says. This is what he says, nationalism. Now,
so yes, I completely disagree. The Jewish people, when somebody talks about Israel, when Iran talks about Israel today, what they're referring to are the religious people who are learning Torah in the land and rebuilding the land and fulfilling the prophecy, which was not mentioned in this video. And it fulfills Eretz Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael is the Jewish people. And everything to do with Eretz Yisrael has to do with the Jewish people. And the fact that Yair Lapid said this or tried to stick it onto Zionism is a lie. Stop believing their lie. Okay? The more you give credence, Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, the more you give credence to Zionism, you destroy Eretz Yisrael. What you're saying is that we throw away Eretz Yisrael and we throw away the Torah values, and that's something you did not speak about in this entire 2-hour video that you have. You never discussed what is Eretz Yisrael. All you've discussed is what the Zionists say it is, and say that the Torah doesn't believe that. And therefore what? And therefore we throw away Eretz Yisrael? Let's see this next clip.
Well, it's very clear that the Ramban rejects that idea, because the Ramban says that the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael is not only a mitzvah to live in the land of Israel, but there's a mitzvah to establish a Jewish state. Now, we have to be honest. The Ramban is not addressing what is the status of a non-religious state or a state that has Arabs and Jews, in governance. That's very true. But l'chol hapachas, according to the Ramban, the establishment of a Jewish state is considered to be a fulfillment of the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. That's an important point that a lot of people don't pick up on, because everybody thinks the Ramban just says Yishuv Eretz Yisrael means there's a mitzvah to live here. And if I live here under Arab rule or Palestinian rule, as some people in a fantasy world believe is possible, I mean, frankly, it is delusional. The compassion we have to have for Neturei Karta is that they're just crazy Because the idea that somehow, so somebody's not responsible for being a lunatic, but somehow the idea that if we give over the land to the Palestinians, we will have beautiful peace, and we'll have all our yeshivos and all of our shuls and all of our learning, makes no sense at all. But besides the fact that it makes no sense, it would also not be a fullness of the mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, which the Ramban says is part of it is to have a shalita of Am Yisrael over the boundaries of Eretz Yisrael.
This is the Iker Zionism. So Mamela, Yesod number one, Zionism. If anybody says that there's a connection between the Jewish people and anything else, the Jewish rock, this rock has is Jewish. It's the Jewish rock, Jewish national rock. It's Avodah Zarah. The Jewish country, that's Avodah Zarah. Jewish flag, Avodah Zarah. Jewish army, Avodah Zarah. The Jews only have one thing, Torah and mitzvahs, nothing else. If you think that there's any brotherhood amongst the Jews besides Torah, then that's Avodah Zarah. That's apikorsis. That's kfira. And if you don't believe in the Torah, you cannot believe in Klal Yisrael. If a person doesn't believe in the Torah, but he does believe that there's such a thing as the Yiddish folk, or maybe he believes in the Torah, but he says there's also Yiddish folk, that's Zionism. That's kfir of Zionism. Now, even not only the Agudah, as I mentioned, Reb Ruvain, Reb Elchanan, fought against Zionist nationalism, but even the Mizrachistim used to know this. In the writings of a Mizrahi Rav Moshe Avigdor Miel, his name was. He was the Mizrahi Rav of Tel Aviv, and he had a very modern Derech Halimut. And the Chazon Ish once saw somebody went to Chazon Ish and he saw a book on the floor covered with a towel, and the Chazon Ish said, "That's Moshe Avigdor Miel's book, it's muktzah, don't touch it." But he said, this Moshe Avigdor Miel, that the nationalism of the Tziyonim is Avodah Zarah. And don't think you're going to make the Friar from, the Friar going to make you Fry. And it's an Egel Hazohov, this nationalism. And don't think that the Torah is only totally in Eretz Yisrael. Forget about Medina, Eretz Yisrael. Because Hashem is Molei Kol Haaretz K'voidoi. Just Mizrachistim, he wanted they should make a Medina to make a safe place for Jews. And Grada, the Mizrachistim, Rhinus, was willing to take Uganda. Because if your whole tachlis is just to make a safe place for Jews, what's a chilik? Palestine, Uganda, Adrab. Where they went in Eretz Yisrael is the most dangerous place. Uganda would be a much better idea. The Fruma Tzionim wanted Uganda. It was Herzl that said, no. It's bad for marketing. You'll never get the Jews to jump into Zionism unless you say Eretz Yisrael, Kedushas Eretz Yisrael, they understand Eretz Yisrael. It's a marketing thing. But even the Mizrachistim knew this. That this business, and today, Bisman Hazeh, you know what happened? It wasn't the Mizrachistim that made the national. Today you have these nationals, they call them Dati Leumi, Rabbi Elchanan says, and Rabbi Ruben Grozovsky too. Mamish the same words. That since nationalism, Lumius is Avodah Zarah, religious nationalism is Shituf. It's Avodah Zarah mixed with Avodah Hashem, that's all it is. And today you have them all over the place. The settlers, those crazy people, the Kahanis, the Misnachlim, that they hold that no, the land is it's from the pagans. That the land has the physical land has a connection to you, and it's your identity, and everything. The army is the Jewish army, and the holy. Where did this? You know who did this? This idea of nationalism. There were Jews even amongst the Mizrahi that liked nationalism. It was an attractive thing. But there was the one man who did a very bad thing. He did the worst thing possible. He not the pshat, he matted nationalism. He said, nationalism, that's Yiddishkeit. Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook. He was the one that, not the Mizrahi, It was him. He was the one that said, he took Goyish and nationalist philosophy, mamish from the Goyim. Remember what I told you from Aaron David Gordon? He says the same thing. It's the exact same thing. That, you know, this business of, that's the Freya, the Goyim came up with this idea, there's something called the Ruach HaUmah, the spirit of the nation. Every nation has a spirit. By me, America has a spirit. America's America, has a culture, but there's a Ruach, like almost like a neshama to a nation. Like we said, that people are not only Eivorim, the nation is the guf. So he took that and he said, Klal Yisrael is an am like all the nations too, and they also have a Ruach HaUmah. And the Ruach HaUmah of Klal Yisrael is the Rebbeinu Shalom. Mamela, if you are getrai to the Klal Yisrael, that means you're getrai to the Rebbeinu Shalom. If you are koifer apikairis and you machal Shabbos v'hesi and you're over on kol ha'tarakula. No, the Ummah is connected, and the Ruach HaUmah is Hashem. This is Mamash Yair Lapid's words. The Ruach HaUmah is Hashem, and Mamela, whoever works for the Ummah is working for Hashem even if he doesn't know it. This is Mamash's Torahs when the Rebbe writes that he saw the Cook's books, and he saw Shrek L'Chazak, and I don't know what he saw, but I can just, we can vorstellen, it could be any of these things. Just imagine. He said that if you're a Apikoris, but you work for the Tchiyas HaUmah, another word he got from the Goyim, Tchiyas HaUmah, the Tchiyas HaUmah, your nefesh is higher than the nefesh of Shloimei Amunei Yisrael who aren't Tzionim. Now, if you're apikoris and you're not a Tzioni, then you're stam fan apikoris fui, like any other apikoris. But if you're apikoris and you're also a Tzioni, then your nefesh is higher than the Shloimei Amunei Yisrael. Why? Because the Am, it's the Am, Klal Yisrael is the Am, and Hashem is connected to them, not the Pshat. See, we know that we have to be connected to Hashem in order to be connected to Klal Yisrael. By him is fakert. The nationalism was, if you're connected to the Am, that means you're connected to Hashem, even if you don't know it. And more.
So here's where the disagreement is. You see, if you don't believe that the Torah says that we should come to Eretz Yisrael, and you believe that Mashiach means that it will happen miraculously, so either you're making up a new religion, or B, you haven't read the prophets. You haven't read Yirmiyahu. You haven't read Yecheskel. You haven't read Yeshaya.
By the way, the biblical boundaries of Eretz Yisrael are much larger than the state of Israel. Now, it's interesting. On one hand, you have Eilat. Eilat is part of the state of Israel, and it may not be part of Eretz Yisrael. That's why some people say in Eilat, you got to keep 2 days of Yom Tov. So there is part of the state of Israel that's outside of Eretz Yisrael, but there's also large parts of Eretz Yisrael that are not in the boundaries of the state of Israel, right? Parts of Lebanon, even parts of Syria, and the like.
You see, what Rabbi Breitowitz is doing, he's separating Eretz Yisrael from Zionism. He's separating Eretz Yisrael from the state. And that would be the normal thing to do, is if in fact Zionism is, as you say, puzzle, so why throw away Eretz Yisrael?
From the Goyim, that's all it is. That's the nationalism. He's responsible, not the Mizrahi. The Mizrahi's bad enough. They still want to be Mischaber and Mershoyim. They wanted to make a Medina against the Sholosh Shavuos. We'll get there. But the idea, this nationalism that got faflans in Klal Yisrael, not only do you say it's mutter, this is Yiddishkeit. And Mamela, all the Freya Tzion, they loved him because this was their crazy philosophy. He did this.
So just to be clear, Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro is calling Rabbi Kook a crazy philosopher. And my question is why? Why do you need to call him a crazy philosopher? Why not just ask the question, if we all agree that Zionism isn't a Torah value, so why are you throwing away Eretz Yisrael? Where's the hate coming from? Let's try to understand this.
So, they had a plan. They had a reason. They had a reason why they wanted to do this. Why did the Tzionim want to do this? What do they gain by it? Well, in those days was the first days after people got freedom of religion, and people got, the Jews had a lot of more rights that they didn't have previously, and a lot of people wanted to be free, either because of reform, assimilation, whatever, and they were free. And they had a problem. The problem was anti-Semitism. And they held that the reason the Goyim hate the Jews is because of us. Just look at us. We don't look like Goyim, we don't think like Goyim. That's why the Goyim hate us. If we would be more like the Goyim would love us. So first they tried assimilating, but it didn't work. Because in 1881 in Russia there were a lot of pogroms, and the assimilated ones were the victims of the pogroms even just as much as the Frum. So they said, no. You know why? We're not Goyish enough. Now really, when Hashem does this, Hashem is telling them assimilation is bad. Go back to the Torah. They said assimilation is good, but it's not good enough. That's why we're suffering. We need to assimilate not only as individuals, the whole Am needs to assimilate. We have to take ganz Klal Yisrael and make them assimilated. How do we do that? Nationalism. Let's get the Jews to think like Goyim. Now, it wasn't easy. See, Jews have hashkafas that are different than the Goyim. Hashkafa number one. We're an Am because of the Torah, not because of anything else. Hashkafa number two, we don't fight wars in Golus. We do like Yaakov Avinu, we bow our heads to the Goyim, and therefore we're safe. Klal Yisrael survived for thousands of years. Everybody says it's a nest. And of course it is, but it's only a nest because we have the instructions from Hashem. Hashem said when Yaakov met Esav, right? Yaakov bowed to Esav. That's the way Klal Yisrael did in Golus. Or Chazal learned Parshas Vayishlach before they met the Goyim. They hated that Tzion. They said, what are you, crazy? What are you, crazy? People are going to kill you. You got to be strong. They're not going to respect you if you bow. And the Mamish didn't understand. It's not even so hard to understand. You see, Hashem said this is how we're going to survive.
Yeah, Hashem said this is how we're going to survive. And now we have survived. The question at stake over here is, what do we do next? Now that we have survived and we have come back to the land and established a state and are learning Torah, and there's more Torah in Eretz Yisrael than ever, are we still going to be stuck in the Golus and say, this wasn't done the way I wanted it done. I wanted it done by the Frum people. Well, excuse me, you are the Frum people. Had you come, or if you will come, then we could do it your way. But you're not going to start over now. This is unbelievable.
There's a story with Reb Chaim Brisker. Reb Baruch Ber said it over. Reb Chaim was then. It was the days of the Maskilim, and the Maskilim made a play to make Litzanos from the Frum Yidden. They always did this, and the play was a Milchama, and the Meshuach Milchama came there, and he said, "Okay, we're making a Milchama. Who wants to come to the Milchama?" And I don't know, thousands of people came. He says, but whoever got married, let's go home. People go home. Whoever built a house, go home. Whoever's scared of war, go home. Whoever soch ben tefillah letefillah, go home. Some seif. Only two people are left. The Chafetz Chaim and Reb Chaim Brisker. And they're there. And that was the end of the stuk play, and it was a latzonos, and they were laughing. They ran to Reb Chaim and said, Reb Chaim, we have to answer. What do we say? So Reb Chaim said, let me see the script. So he looked at it, and he said, when he said, go home, the people built houses. Very good. This is true. This is good. You know what? Everything here is good. It's right, except for one thing they left out. We won the war. That's how Klal Yisrael won wars. Now they didn't have stronger armies. It was all Shaloi al Pi Derech HaTeva. That's all it was. We won with Schusim, nothing else. The Tzionim hated that. Schusim, what's Schusim? When's Schusim? No, Hishtadlus. Now,
you see, one thing that Satmar and Rabbi Yaakov Schwartz needs as representing Satmar is to say that nothing happens in Israel miraculously. In fact, Israel is just a strong nation, and we're just very strong, and we should always win wars because of our strength, but not because of any miracles. And this is so important, because God forbid that God should be performing miracles for the Jewish people who have returned to the land. And this is where things go crazy. You see, the entire world recognizes the miracle that's happening in this land, and in fact are coming up. We're already in Yecheskel 38, we're already in Gog Magog. The world is already slowly waking up and connecting and trying, and Iran is trying to manipulate the world to come up against Eretz Yisrael. And the Jews and the Goyim and the whole world, how many people I've met and how many people, Rabbi Singer and so many other Kiruv organizations and rabbis around the world, people, neighbors of mine, our whole community is filled with people who have witnessed this miracle happening and came to be a part of it. Are we all wrong? Let's continue.
I'll tell you how. Here's their plan. Chaim Brisker said, a Moiridik of art. He said they don't want to shmad Yidden in order to make a Medina. They need to make a Medina in order to shmad Yidden. The Medina was not the end goal of Zionism. The end goal of Zionism was that the Yidden should tear out those hashkafas and change their ideas. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to make the Jews think like a regular nation. We're going to give them a country. We're going to give them an army. It's going to be their army. All the Jews will think it's their army. All the Jews will look at the country as their country. We're going to give them a language. They're all going to look at it in a common language. And when the Jews have all of this, they'll start looking at themselves psychologically as a nation, a political nation. And what's going to be? Well, right now we are a religion. Religions have goals. Torah, mitzvahs. Nations also have goals. Win gold medals, Nobel Prizes, have a nice national anthem, win song contests, Olympics, strong army, and that's what's going to happen to Klal Yisrael. When we give these equipment, national equipment to the Jews, they'll start maybe 1 year, 10 years, 100 years. The Jews will start looking at themselves like a Goyish nation. And when Israel wins an Olympic gold medal, the Yidden in New York will be proud. Oh, Yidden, now we can win gold medals. Avodah Zarah, because you connected the Jews to some country over there. The Jews, when Israel wins a Nobel Prize, the Jews will brag. Israel won a Nobel Prize. Israel has a Mossad. Israel is strong. All these things. Well, I'm an American. What do I have to do with some stupid country in the Middle East? The Teretz says, no. You're one Am. They're your country. It's your nation. It's your this. That's the Avodah Zarah of Zionism. That's what they wanted.
Over here, I have to stop the video. Israel, Eretz Yisrael, is not a stupid country in the Middle East. How dare you talk about Eretz Yisrael in such a way? Eretz Yisrael is crying for its children to come back, and you call it a stupid country? Now I want to address the prediction that you're talking about that was made 100 years ago. And this is the fundamental core problem with this entire argument so far. And I've played 99% of the video. I'm going to leave a link in the description. You could watch the entire almost 2 hours. The flaw in this logic is that there was a prediction. The prediction was that the secular government would force the religious government and religious people into becoming non-religious. That was a prediction. Did that prediction happen? Well, you might say, oh, the army, this. Did it happen? And the answer is, not only did it not happen, and Torah was able to flourish, Torah right now, the center of the world of Torah is in Eretz Yisrael. The Gedolim of Torah are in Eretz Yisrael. Torah is being learnt in Eretz Yisrael more than it has ever been in the history of since Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Torah has grown. Ein Torah k'Torahs Eretz Yisrael. So then you're stuck with the question, if they made a prediction and the prediction didn't come true, so does that mean that the Satmar Rebbe was wrong? Well, I'll address this very shortly. I'll give you a little taste of the answer. It's as follows, that it is possible that Reb Haigoin made a prediction based on Daniel when Mashiach would come. and Rashi would seem to indicate that his prediction was wrong. And Rashi also made a prediction, and his prediction didn't come out. Now, do we say they're wrong? No, it was a possibility that could have happened. Now, in fact, the Torah tells us, in Navi, tells us the story of David HaMelech. That David HaMelech, after V'hoya Shaniach, David HaMelech put down most of his enemies, and he was sitting comfortably, and he said, I'm sitting in a house made of cedar tree, and the Aron Bris Hashem is under a cloth. And he goes to Nasan HaNavi, and Nasan HaNavi comes to him, and he says, I would like to build a bias for Hashem. And Nasan HaNavi says to David, whatever you want to do, you should do. And that night, Nasan gets a nevuah. Hashem comes to him and tells him, go tell David that his son, Shlomo, will build the Beis HaMikdash. But he won't. So why would the Torah tell us this argument? It's for one reason, my friends. It is that in predictions, in things that might happen, 100 years ago, we predicted that this world, Torah and Eretz Yisrael, will not survive. That prediction has been proven wrong. So instead of rethinking our entire philosophy of how we stand towards Eretz Yisrael, that we have connected, that this ideology has connected Zionism with Eretz Yisrael and thrown out Eretz Yisrael because it says that Eretz Yisrael right now is being run by Zionists. And the Zionists are trying to keep the Torah out. So do we just leave and say we're not going to be a part of it? Or do we come on board, like it says in the Navi, and try to connect the two sides? The two sticks, Yehuda and Yosef, Yehuda with Binyamin and Yerushalayim, and Yosef, the 10 tribes, to bring them and make them one stick. That's what we're all trying to do. That's what most of the Jews in Eretz Yisrael are doing. And no, today, very few people still think the way you think, Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. Very few people. And yes, you had to spend 2 hours explaining to your own people what Zionism is in order to tell them that therefore we don't move to Eretz Yisrael. But nobody in Eretz Yisrael is in Eretz Yisrael, very few people, because of Zionism. Zionism, for whatever reason, like we explained with Omri, or with the second Beis HaMikdash, or with Shlomo HaMelech, who came from the Kesher with David with Bathsheba, all these things, all the goodness that came out from the Jews falling, or Dan, Shevet Dan, Shimshon HaGibor, Dan wanted to show the lowest Shevet, the Shevet who was involved in the most Avodah Zarah. Specifically from them has to come the Yeshua. There's plenty of theological ways of explaining what's going on. But we can't deny what has happened. This already happened. The Jews have returned and Torah has expanded. So to continue to spread the prediction that was made, when that prediction in fact has been proven to be false, and yes, prophets can, and even prophets can make mistakes, and I don't think anybody thinks that the Rebbe was a prophet, but he made a prediction, and his prediction has been proven incorrect. Let's continue.
That was the goal of Zionism. Now, until now, we've been speaking only about Zionism, Zionism. Let's talk about Zionists. There's a Maisa with the Rebbe in 1955 in Montreal. He went to Montreal for Chanukah Sabayis in Satmar Beis Medrash. The chief rabbi of Montreal then was darshaning, and he wanted to darshan something in honor of Satmar. So here's what he said. He said, then days of the Chasam Sofer, there was a machlokes regarding the Talmud. Says the Litvische and Polish Gedolim wanted to be together with the bad Jews to make them better. And the Hungarians wanted to separate with them. And it was a machlokes between the Gedolim. And this was the machlokes in the Torah between Avram and Sarah, whether to throw out Yishmael. And Avram held like the Gedolim of Poland and Litva. Let's keep him, we'll make him better. And Sarah held like the Gedolim of Hungary, and Hashem Paskins like the Gedolim of Hungary, and that was his shtickle time. The Rebbe got up, he interrupted him, and he says, Chas v'sholem, there was no such machlokes. And then he motioned for him to continue, and he sat down. Then the Rebbe went over to him and said, first of all, you got your history war, and it was the days of the Maram Shik, not the Chasam Sofer. Second of all, when did the Jews say not to separate from the Rishoyim? In the days of Shapsi Tzvi, in the days of the Tzedukim, there is no machlokes b'chlal such a thing.
So if we've been doing something wrong for all of Klal Yisrael, that we have decided to separate Yehuda and Yosef, and yes, if you read the Navi, 100%, there was always the group of people who were learning Torah, and there were always the secular Jews. Read all the Navi. And it was the secular Jews who built the second Beis HaMikdash, and it was Ezra who went to every one of those cities, and he said, come to Eretz Yisrael, come build the Beis HaMikdash. And they said, you sit with your non-religious people in Yerushalayim and make your big Yerushalayim, we'll make our small Yerushalayim here. And when you look in the Navi, and you look in Yecheskel 38 and 39, and you see that the final Geula is when Yosef and Binyamin come together, when Yehuda and Yosef come together and they become one, when we stop separating ourselves from Eretz Yisrael because of the secular government. That's exactly what we're trying to do. That's what Hidabrut does. That's what all the Kiruv organizations are doing. We're trying to connect. We have hundreds of organizations who go and take Ayelat HaShachar, endless of taking Kolo people in Eretz Yisrael and teaching Torah. You know, if you're in Chabad, you could come to Tel Aviv. There's so much Torah to be taught. There's so many people. And you should know that even in Eretz Yisrael, even with all the secular people, they don't even know what Zionism is, let alone the Torah. They're all Tinok Shenishba. It's the Gullus itself, but for some reason Hashem willed it that these people should build up this land, and these people should be part of this Geula. Perhaps it was people who thought like you, Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro, people who were very stringent in all areas of Torah, but in areas of following the Torah, of what it says in the Torah, of Eretz Yisrael, they were lacking. And they didn't have a love. You know, when you have a love for something, you're willing to give up something for it. And yes, there was a time when Klal Yisrael didn't listen to the Gedolim. And that was the Meraglim. Kalev and Yeshua did not listen to Gedolei Ador. The Gedolim all said, we can't come to Eretz Yisrael. We can't do it. But Kalev and Yeshua said, and Kalev went to Ma'aras HaMachpelah to daven. He davened for what? He davened that Hashem should take out of his heart, that he should v'sechazena einenu, that he should open up his eyes, that he should see the possibility that Eretz Yisrael could be the final place for the Shekhinah to rest now that the Jews have returned. Probably 50% are in Eretz Yisrael. Where do you think the Shekhinah is? Let's continue.
Now, let me point out this idea that Jewish statehood is something to celebrate also emerges not only from Ramban, but even from Rambam, who doesn't say there's a mitzvah of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. But the Rambam discusses why we say Hallel on Hanukkah. Now, if we were to ask any of us, why do we say Hallel on Hanukkah? Most of us would think about the miracle of the candles burning for 8 days, or even the miracle of defeating the Greeks so that we could keep the Torah. That's what we would commonly say, because the Greeks were stopping us from keeping the Torah. But you know what the Rambam says? The Rambam says a remarkably Zionist statement. The Rambam says the Simcha of Hanukkah was that Jewish sovereignty over Eretz Yisrael was restored. Wow. So the Rambam is saying the restoration of Jewish sovereignty. In fact, if you want a makor for saying Hallel on Yom Haatzmaut, that would actually be a makor. except for the Gemara in Megillah that says we were still in Sakana. Right? Hanukkah was the end of a war. Yom Ha'atzmaut is the beginning of a war.
We do say Hallel on Hanukkah.
We do, a full Hallel. Now keep in mind that the Hasmonean kings were not tzaddikim. Many of them were non-religious, and many of them were persecutors of the Chachamim. And even so, the Rambam says, the restoration of Jewish sovereignty was a reason for celebration.
Then there's a guy who comes in with his eyes closed. He knows already the soup is here, this is here. Had Kol HaTorah on his fingertips where he knew where everything is. You're talking about Shas, Midrashim, Shemu Shemayim, Arayas from Akasha, from a Radak in Yeshaya. Radak, yes, es a kasha, so vaistois, mashma something from the kasha. Mamish Kol HaTorah.
I have no question that the Satmar Rav, was a Gadol B'Yisrael. But a raya, a proof that he was a Gadol B'Yisrael, is not knowing a Radak on Yeshaya. I don't see what the connection, why every Jew shouldn't know Radak on Yeshaya, because that's something that every person knows. It's very simple. A person could learn it. So I don't see the proof that he's bringing over here. Now, he does go into the Shalosh Shvuos. We're not going to go into that. You can watch the link. It's connected over here and see the full video. But I'm going to get to the end of the video, and then we're going to talk about that. Have a look.
From 40 years ago to today, people want to hear much more today. Because Israel, in the 50s and the 60s, everybody loved it. They didn't have any misnagdim amongst the Goyim except the Arabs. Nobody was against them. After 1967, when the whole thing with the territory started, 1977, when the militants, Menachem Begin and his chevra got into office, then people started hating Israel. But before that, in the 50s, everybody loved Israel. Now, people are more Yidden also. I know a Yid, personally, a Baal Tshuva, was at Kolzman, he wasn't from. He wanted nothing to do with Yiddishkeit because he associated Yiddishkeit with Israel, and nobody likes Israel. And then when he found out that there are Yidden in New York that protest against Israel, that are against Zionism, he said, maybe I should find out about Yiddishkeit. And today he's learning in Koilel. He's a young man learning in Koilel. And it's not only him, there are plenty like that.
So my question to you, my audience, is which side of the coin do you stand? Are you with the people in Eretz Yisrael, or are you with the people who say that Eretz Yisrael is an evil avodah zarah? I mean, I can go on. This video goes on for quite much more. I'll just show you one more clip, and then we'll close with Rabbi Breitowitz. Have a look.
Man got up and said, what are you, crazy? It wasn't an S. Every scientist, every expert, every historian, everybody knows it wasn't. They knew Israel was going to win. Here is an example of the Bilbul HaMoichus that takes place. And I want to tell you something, my book that I wrote, so I wrote all sorts of bad things about Zionism, Zionim, Medina. You know what bothers them the most? It's unbelievable. The fact that I wrote the Six-Day War wasn't an S. And I quoted the generals said it wasn't an S. One of the sons, a son of one of the generals in the Six-Day War, read my book, and he contacted me. And I asked him if he heard anything from his father more. By the way, his father, I quoted his father. His father was interviewed for a magazine after the war, and he said, this thing, we were never even in Sakana. It was a bluff. It was bluff. We wanted people to get scared, and people were scared. So they told everybody it's a sakana, and we wanted America to give us green lights to attack. But I said, did you hear anything else from your father that we don't know? He said, yeah. He says, Egypt. He says, everybody in the know knew that Egypt would not be ready to fight anybody in a war for 18 months, maybe 2 years. Now, here's the question. Ask people. Ask them, why do you say this war was a mess? Why? Why? Well, everybody said it was. No, that's not a reason, right? They will not have a reason. It's against everything, the derech hateva that everybody knows, and yet they insist with a tkifus mamish of Mesiras Nefesh, no, it was a mess. If anybody can explain to me this, except that's a Maisa something. And here you have something that you don't need to be a big London to know. And one man, Satmar Rebbe, got up and said it's not a nest.
So, you'll notice one thing. I did not mention anything yet. I'll mention it in a few minutes. About this being the footsteps of Mashiach, this being the beginning of Geula. You don't have to go there yet. As you know, in the prayer that was composed for Medinat Yisrael, that perhaps in some of your home shuls were said, there is a phrase that's a very controversial phrase, that the establishment of the state of Israel is described as Reishis Semichas Gulaseinu, the beginning of the flowering of redemption, the beginning of redemption, the beginning of the messianic process. I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but everything I've said until now has nothing to do with that. It's not a question of part of Mashiach, it's not a question of Geula. It's simply an idea that the establishment of Jewish rule over Eretz Yisrael is, according to the Ramban, a fulfillment of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. And according to the Rambam, although he does not have Yishuv Eretz Yisrael as a mitzvah, it is a source of rejoicing, because that is the basis of Hanukkah. Okay, this is not yet a messianic perspective. This is simply looking at the idea that Baruch Hashem, the Jewish people have established a sovereignty over Eretz Yisrael. Now, obviously, there's many issues that we have with the Medinas Yisrael, legitimately so. The government as a whole, is non-religious. Israel is officially a secular state. Like, what do they call it? They call it a Jewish democratic state. A Jewish democratic state. Israel is a schizophrenic state, because how can you be totally democratic if you're Jewish at the same time? In fact, a professor once said, somebody asked him, what is it? Is it a Jewish state? Is it a democratic state? And he said the most important part of the description is the dash in between the two words. It's a schizophrenic state. And therefore we have a lot of disagreements. We have disagreements regarding the army, military service. We have disagreements regarding the standards of modesty, regarding the Chilul Shabbos. And these are things that we argue about, and we try to change, and we try to negotiate. But sometimes what happens is that in the heat of arguments, you get so blinded by individual trees that you don't see an overall forest. And one has to understand, and this is really, I think, a basic orientation to the state of Israel, that we have to be very, very grateful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for what happened in 1948. Remember, 1948 was only 3 years after the end of World War II. The Holocaust kind of lasted for 12 years, from 1933, when Hitler became Chancellor of Germany, to 1945. In fact, this month, April 1945, Hitler, committed suicide, and the war ended shortly thereafter. 6 million Jews died, 1.5 million children. Gedolim, Kedoshim, yeshivas were wiped out. The world was desolate. The world was dark. We have not recovered, really, to this day. To this day, we have not really recovered. And only 3 years later, there was a momentary window where the world had mercy on the Jewish people. Quickly ended, but right after the Holocaust, there was a particular tiny little window. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed the Jewish people to come back after thousands of years, almost 2,000 years. And if you look at what has been built here in the 72 years or so since then, an infrastructure, the Gashmias, is amazing. More importantly, if you look at the Ruchnias, look at the yeshivas, look at the Torah learning, Look at the Shmiras HaMitzvos. Look at how much the so-called secular government helps yeshivos. You'd be a little shocked. Now, granted, some people like Brisk, and after you have to respect Brisk for their consistency, they will not take a dime or a shekel from the government, because they say when you take government money, you're subject to government control. And you have to respect that view. They take a shita that they will not take government money, but most of us are a little more lenient than that. So the government is a great, great supporter of Torah. Yeah, there's a lot of strings attached, and there's machloksim and fights, etc. But you can't allow the individual issues that we grapple with to obscure the growth of Torah, the growth of Ruchnius, the ability of Jews to come, the ability of Jews to keep mitzvos, to live with the protection, all coming from Hashem, but with an army and with a police force that are the human shluchim that protect us from enemies that would try to destroy us. Right across the street, there are people that would be happy to slit your neck if they'd have the opportunity. So, not to be a makir tov, not to be a person with gratitude, is a very, very repulsive and disgusting midah. The very name for a Jew is Yehudi, and I mentioned before, many times I've already mentioned, Yehudi means to be grateful. Leah called her fourth son Yehuda because she said, I am grateful to Hashem because He has given me more than I'm entitled. Because she knew there are 4 wives and 12 tribes, so she figured every wife gets 3 kids. When she got number 4, she got more than she deserved. That's gratitude. Says the Sfas Emes, a Jew is called a Yehudi because we have to go through life feeling Hashem has given us more chesed than we deserve. So, a Jew is many things, but the very definition of a Yehudi is one who is grateful. So, how can you look at Eretz Yisrael and not be grateful for the gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us? And how can you look at Eretz Yisrael and not be grateful even for what the Israeli government has given? For police, for fire, for infrastructure, for people who collect the garbage, for chayolim. Yeah, by and large, the Torah world is not in favor of compulsory drafting of yeshiva boys, taking them out of the Beis HaMedrash, because without Torah, there's no nitzachon. So we fight about that, we argue about that. But does that mean you shouldn't be grateful to what soldiers are doing? Right? How do you explain a soldier who even is from, who comes to daven mincha, that somebody spits on him? Can that be explained? Can that be justified? No, it cannot be. So, I think, whether you celebrate today or not today makes no difference. A day is a day. There's nothing magical in this day. This day is not a Yom Tov from Chazal. Makes no difference. The particular day is actually not important. But I think it is a time, at least, when you can reflect on a certain attitude that you have towards Eretz Yisrael, number one, which is independent of statehood, towards Medinas Yisrael, towards the people who create an infrastructure that allows the Torah community to flourish and to grow and to be matzliach. So it provides both the ability to grow spiritually and to be physically protected and the like. And then to have a feeling of hakaras hatov. This is really what the Panovich Rav was about. This is why the Panovich Rav flew the flag on Yom Haatzmaut. He says we have to be grateful. And when we stop being grateful, we're losing part of what it means to be a Jew. To be a Yid, Yehudi, is to say Natalti Yeser El Chelki. Okay, so that's, whether you say Hallel, don't say Hallel, with a bracha, without a bracha, or you shouldn't say it with a bracha, either way, whether you say Tachanan, don't say Tachanan, these are technicalities These are minor things. But whether I should be makir tov to what soldiers are doing, to what police are doing, to what firemen are doing, to what garbage people are doing, that's not disputable. There has to be akaras hatov. When there's not akaras hatov, there is something sick in our personalities. Our personalities are not expressing what Judaism is about.
I've lived in Eretz Yisrael for over 30 years. And there was a time that you wouldn't find a flag in my house. And that was because I, too, was under the impression that, and rightfully so, that this holiday was set up at a time that shouldn't be set up for holidays, not between the new month of Rosh Chodesh Iyar. It shouldn't be set up holidays. We definitely shouldn't have live music, and all the arguments against the flag. But there's something that is very different about the current status of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, and that is very simple. That when we hit 50%, the Shekhinah has returned to Eretz Yisrael with the Jewish people. Hashem says that when we go into Galus, He's going to go into Galus with us. But when we return to the land, He will come and be with the Jewish people in the land. This year, Yom Haatzmaut will be celebrated throughout Israel. And yes, we don't understand the ways of Hashem. Furthermore, the book of Ezra tells us of the 42,360, I believe, people who came back, who primarily weren't the religious people. In fact, 113 of them were intermarried. But yet, they were allowed in, and they became the ones who helped build the Beis HaMikdash. You see, we don't know what the Galus has done to Klal Yisrael. When you see an irreligious person, when you see a person who has strayed away from the path, don't think for a second that he is just one person. He is a result of the exile. The very exile God is removing us from. If there was ever a scenario that the Jews would have an easier time to come to the land, it would be today. Think back 200 years ago. You get an interview with God, and God asks you, how could I bring the Jewish people back? And you say, perhaps you should make these machines that travel at high speeds through the air and carry them in cabins, and make a state that will be built up and ready for the Jewish people to inhabit. Even if we say admittingly that there were many irreligious people, they are only the result of the exile. And yet, God, Hashem, has gifted these people, these messengers, for whatever reasons, to come to Eretz Yisrael and build up the land. In fact, the king of Omri, the Gemara in Sanhedrin, the Talmud in Sanhedrin asks, this king was a bad king. Vayas hara be'enei Hashem, he did many bad things in God's eyes. But yet, the Talmud asks, why was he worthy of having 3 generations from his family being kings? And the Talmud says because he built up a place called the Shomron. You might ask, did he bring the Shomron? Did he build the Shomron so it should be a place for Torah? No, my friends. He did this for Avodah Zarah, for idol worship. But yet, we see that Hashem has many messengers. Hashem has many messengers who do His work. politicians, and people who work throughout the country. Each one of us are doing a different part of Hashem's mission. If you are religious and you're watching this, you were gifted a perspective of a religious person. You see, Hashem wants all the Jews to return, and He could very easily return everybody to God. God could do that. But He said, I'm going to make two teams. Let's call one team Yehuda, and we'll call the other team Yosef. And Yosef and Yehuda are living on two sides of the world. One of them is immersed in Torah, and one of them has returned to the land, but is immersed in building up the land. Rav Yaakov Emden, in his introduction to the Siddur HaYavitz, called Sulam Beit El, says the following: don't think for a second that there's Torah outside of Eretz Yisrael. In fact, the Torah can only be fulfilled in Eretz Yisrael. And furthermore, one may argue that I could learn Torah in Chutz La'aretz. I have good yeshivas learning Torah in Chutz La'aretz. He says the Torah of outside of the land is not Torah. It does not last. And that's why Avira de Eretz Yisrael is machkim. The ear inside of Eretz Yisrael makes one smart. Rav Zera fasted 100 times that he should forget the Torah that he learnt outside. But why? What's so special about Eretz Yisrael? So Rav Yaakov Emden says it's very simple. The Torah in Chutz La'aretz is fake. It's fake Torah because you are not following what the Torah says. The entire book of the Torah, like Rav Michal Weichbrod, I call him a Rav because he's taught me what I already know. And every Jew knows this, that they belong in Eretz Yisrael. The entire Torah is just the book of the Jews leaving Mitzrayim. I heard Rav Breitowitz say this. Just leaving Mitzrayim. That's our whole job, is coming to Eretz Yisrael. We've never fully left Mitzrayim. And now, the Torah in Eretz Yisrael is greater than the Torah in Chutz La'aretz. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah. The Torah is flowing out of Eretz Yisrael. In fact, the giants, like Yishai Fleischer, had him on, and he said to me, Aaron, stop saying, where are the religious Jews? The religious Jews are in Israel. Those are the religious Jews. You see, in Chutz La'aretz, you're acting religious, but you're not part of the heart of the Jewish people. The heart of the Jewish people, my friends, is in Jerusalem. The Shekhinah is with the heart of the Jewish people. The giants of Torah are in Eretz Yisrael, where you can walk the streets and speak to any person you meet. I pick up hitchhikers all the time, and I always ask them, what are you learning? And the whole way we talk Torah. This is Eretz Yisrael. Ashreinu. What a gift. When we go up to Shemayim, Hashem asks us, Tzipisa liyeshua. Do you think when you say, yeah, I waited for Mashiach. I waited every single day. Hashem is going to look at you and smile and say, you waited every day? What were you waiting for? I was waiting for Mashiach to come. So what did you do? I learned Torah. I davened for Mashiach to come. Did you read the Sefer? Did you read the Chumash? Did you read the Navi? Do you understand that the Chet HaMeraglim was done by the leaders of Klal Yisrael? The great Nesiim, who if they had come to Eretz Yisrael would lose their position and would be given over to the Kohanim. And these great rabbis said, I'd rather have my position than come to Eretz Yisrael. That's the message of the Torah. There is no other message. We can't really understand the greatness of Eretz Yisrael. But Eretz Yisrael is a living, breathing person. And she cries. And she says, where are my children? V'taymer Tzion, azavani Hashem. Tzion cries out and says, God has forsaken me. Says the Malbim, this is after half the Jews return. And that's what we're witnessing today. The war with Iran is clear. We don't hate Jews. We don't want Jews in Eretz Yisrael. Rashi says, if somebody comes and says that you stole the land, tell them that God told us to. The job of every Jew is to expel the 7 nations inside of the land. You might say, well, expel? Well, yes. There is a concept of ger toshav. If they want to follow the Noahide laws, it's a question if they're already here, if they need to be expelled. But yes. But why? Why, Hashem, couldn't you give us Uganda? Why did you give us this land? You understand that the holiness of the land, says the Sfas Emes, is essentially the Or Haganuz, the hidden light that left Adam when he sinned. That light went up to Shamayim, went on top of the Goren, the field of Arnon HaYavusi, the Yavusi. It stood there with its sword up in the sky, like prophets say in Divrei Hayamim and in Shmuel. V'char by shlufa, v'ta'atzar magefa, and the sin stopped. What was the sin for? The sin was for sphira, for counting. Counting the Jewish people brings a bad omen. It's ayin hara, to count. The Torah says that it brings magefa, that you shouldn't count the people. But David HaMelech wanted the Jews to sin. He doesn't know why. We first should try to figure out why. The Ramban says very simple. The Shechnoi Tidrishu is a mitzvah daraisa, to seek out the Makam HaMikdash, to seek out the place where we could build a resting place for Hashem. What are we doing? Are we praying to Hashem that Hashem should do the work? Is that what we're doing? We're saying, Hashem, please build the Beis HaMikdash. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Rashi, but you didn't see the Zohar. And that Rashi is in the Havamina of the Gemara. Regardless, the Beis HaMikdash is built under the spiritual Beis HaMikdash. There's a machlokes Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, if this world reflects the next world, or the next world reflects this world. The Zohar says that the third Beis HaMikdash that Rashi is referring to, Kivyochel, is the Beis HaMikdash that falls down from Shamayim. That one is in Slabish on the Beis HaMikdash that's down on over here. That one we built. That's why if you look in Yecheskel, Membeis, it describes this Beis HaMikdash. It tells us where everything is. It tells us the dimensions. It's huge. I'm actually working on a 3D book on it. We have it in publishing now. We're working on publishing this book. My father is doing it primarily. But we have all the plans. It's going to be out. Be'ezrat Hashem. Leave a comment if you want to hear more about that. But are we preparing physically? You see, if we don't break this now, if we don't break this attitude, this separation of Zionism and Zion, separate them. Forget everything you heard about the flag. And start understanding. I feel like I'm giving a schmooze, but I really believe this. If we all just start understanding that Hashem gave every person, every one of us, a tafkid, a purpose. And if you're in Eretz Yisrael, your purpose is different than if you're in Chutz La'aretz. And we have this gift that we're able to talk to each other. If you're listening to this in Chutz La'aretz, let me know where you are. Tell me. We have to do the work. there were 4 kings, David, Asa, Yehoshaphat, and Chizkiyahu. These 4 kings, the Medrash says, David said, Erdoif oivai v'asigem, let me chase after my enemies and catch up to them and slaughter them. Asa just said, Erdoif oivai, let me just chase them. And Hashem, you do the work. Yehoshaphat, he took the guitar and he started strumming and singing and dancing, and his enemies fell. And Chizkiyahu laid in bed. And Hashem wanted Chizkiyahu to say shir. He wanted him to give praise. In fact, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, Ratzu lasu Chizkiyahu Mashiach v'sancherev goygu magog. They wanted to make him Mashiach. But why? Why wasn't he answered? Because he didn't say halal. He didn't say praise. Yes, I've changed. I don't make a bracha for technical reasons. But do I say halal? So, thank you for joining me. Please like, share, and subscribe. Give me your thoughts. Tell me where you feel. If this resonates with you, if you want to hear more content like this, and hopefully we'll be doing another show on this topic before Yom Yerushalayim, which will be much more in depth. And we really need to wake up, all of us, myself included, to the miracles happening right now. The kibbutz galuyos that has happened. It's no longer a question of how it will happen. It has happened. We have returned. The Jewish people, the heart, the soul are in the land. The land is rebuilt, and we are just waiting for the last remnants to join us. And as Michal Weichbrod says, Chazak v'amatz. Shalom from just outside Jerusalem.